I have this gigantic separation between the population of my bees in blue and the population of my mites down here coming out of winter. When I first started putting videos on YouTube, it was 2008. And those first few videos, I was showing you guys how to use powdered sugar to help reduce mites in your hive. So I've been at this for a long time, even before I got on YouTube. And so then I quickly started showing you guys years and years ago, maybe a decade ago, how you can break the queen's brood cycle by caging the queen. We talked about that yesterday in my other video, and I went into more detail about that. And then green drone comb came around. And the whole reason that I want to give you some options that are pre-treatment is so that in case you find that these treatments that we're using are bad for bees, then what we're using still is a good weapon against the mites. And I explained that in the document. I'll leave a link to this in the description. But I kind of explained the history of mites and how they came about and how we reacted when they first came about. And we were using chemicals back in the early 90s against mites that proved to be absorbed in the wax and caused a lot of problems with bees. And so that's something that, we're always watching. How many of these treatments that we're using today we may find out in 5 or 6, 10 years that, these things aren't good for our bees. I don't know, I'm just saying. So we need to have a lot of tools in our toolbox to fight the Varroa destructor mite. Now, another thing that I started promoting maybe a decade ago, I really started advocating a concept that is still new. It was really new back then. But the concept is if we can control our mites all year long by using some of these methods that I'm talking about, then we have a big separation. Well, you know what? There's no better way to describe it. Let's go over to the board and let me explain it over there. And so let's just start by making a graph today, something like this. Let's just start to say that the beginning package starts at about 10,000 bees in a 3-pound package. And, they go up to 20,000 to 30,000 to 40,000. Be sure and subscribe. David Bobblehead really is hoping you guys subscribe. It means a lot to me. I really do love you guys. It's always great to be with you. So please click on the subscribe button and click on the bell to be notified each time I make a new video. Now, let's continue talking about the Varroa destructor mite. Now let's go ahead and put the calendar year here. Let's do January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, and the end of the year. So this is the season. Normally you would install a package in April. So if you install a package in April, that means that this package of bee is roughly about 10,000 bees right here on the line. 10,000, right? The package continues to grow as you work your bees. They grow up to almost total population by July up to about 40,000. And then about July and August, after the summer solstice, the bees start to go down. And so the population of the bees start going down. Daylight is getting shorter, days are getting darker. And for the most part, we feel that as the season goes on, the bees traditionally have gotten smaller and smaller as winter hits. And so as they come out of winter, like they're way down here, in about just below 20,000, and they're coming out of winter at about this number, almost that like a package. They're almost coming out of winter, historically, not much larger than a package of bees. Well, hopefully when you get your package of bees, the mites are pretty low right here. Maybe your package bee provider has done some cool things to keep mite levels down, whatever, but your mite levels are pretty low. But as you have a generation of bees every 21 days roughly, you're going to keep having more generations of mites. So let's just kind of mark off what we would think would be generations of bees happening. So with each generation you have with bees, the mites are reproducing. And so the mites are maybe starting off kind of low like this, but then they start getting higher, and the mites get higher with the population of bees. And then what happens is something that's alarming right here around August and September, July, August, September, is that the mite population continues to stay high like this because the bees, these mites are living longer, and the population of the mites will stay pretty high and not go down as quickly as the population of the bees. Now, so this whole area right here is just mite overload if you do nothing. And this is what historically has been practiced, but I want to show you what I came up with a decade, maybe a decade and a half ago, that really changed my whole mite experience. So what I started doing a long time ago, and I started thinking, how can I get my bees to grow as they normally do in population until they get up pretty strong in the summertime at about 40 to 50,000. And what about if I keep my mite levels low? What about if I use things like this? And I talked about that in yesterday's video. I talked about these things. Green drone comb. Now this is an effective way to keep mite levels low. And so it's hard to write backwards. Green drone comb. And so I talked about this is a way that you don't have to use treatments. And I explained that in my last video. But another way you can do it is by breaking the queen's brood cycle. Now this is a very effective way to keep your mite levels down. Because if you break the queen's brood cycle, you break the mite's brood cycle. And so this is really important to consider. And so I've written about this for well over a decade. Breaking the queen's brood cycle with the push-in queen cage. Again, I explained that both in yesterday's video and in a special free publication that I made for you guys. And I'll leave a link for that in the description below. But there's other ways that I've been advocating that we can keep mite levels low. Integrated pest management, even before we bring out the big guns. Things like screen bottom board is a good way to do it. That helps with some mites falling outside the hive. So we have the green drone comb, breaking the queen's brood cycle, screen bottom boards, and then finally we have what a lot of people have known as powdered sugar dustings. And that has been shown to show some effect on getting mite levels lower. I started this many, many years ago, and when it hits August and I enter a time of dearth, what I like to do is continue to feed my bees. And that's why I invented the Burns Bees feeding system, a special feeder that I could feed my bees all through that dearth period that usually for me happens between August all the way through somewhere into October when we finally start having some goldenrod here. So that's a pretty good period of time that the bees aren't really having anything to go out and forage on, and that's when traditionally they drop down like in our other graph. But by me feeding them here, I can actually retain the number of bees longer until I get all the way into the fall asters like goldenrod, but also all the way through winter. So I start feeding my bees from the top, and their numbers really just stay here, maybe dropping a little bit. Where before, they were dropping down pretty quickly, headed down to 10 to 20,000. Now, let's talk about mites. So I've been advocating forever, let's use these things here instead of the chemicals, and let's see if we can keep our mites under control. So if we can keep practicing green drone comb swap outs, keep breaking the brood cycle of the queen around July, August, and into September, these 3 months, we can break the queen's brood cycle. Then we can actually keep our mite levels low year long. And so as we get into this period, we don't have to see this orange line follow its traditional trajectory all the way up here and ride like this, right? So instead of the dotted lines crossing here, look how far the lines are now between my bees way up here and my mites way down here. Instead of trying to figure out how I can kill mites with an application in the spring and then another application sometime in the fall, that gap there is what hurts right here, because if you just treat mites in the spring one time, they're going to quickly catch up and outbrood the bees. And so this is what I'm trying to show you now, that if we keep the mite levels low all year, we keep the virus load low all year on the bees. Especially hobbyist backyard beekeepers that don't have, more than 50 hives, you can practice these kind of techniques. So as I go into winter, I feed my bees my winter bee candy boards, starting around December here, feeding them candy. They keep raising brood, and now I really can't use these types of mite control in the wintertime. So my mite levels are likely to rise to some degree like this with my different generations of bees that are happening in the winter months, but it doesn't get real high. So then my bees are still way up here, ironically enough, as strong as they might be all summer long, because winter bees don't die. They're being fed the winter bee kind all through the winter months, and they continue to eat and raise brood. Still, I have this gigantic separation between the population of my bees in blue and the population of my mites down here coming out of winter. So when I'm getting ready to make splits in the winter, look at this. And before the traditional method, I would have coming out of January, February with my mites and my bees at the same level, around 15 to 20,000 bees. So this model is something that has really worked well. And if you want to incorporate treatments, it does happen. I do have to do it sometimes. There are times in this season here where the mites traditionally have gotten high, that I do have some hives that will have higher mites. And that's when I can select what sort of treatment, or if I want to up more of the work that I'm doing with these integrated pest managements over here. Now, when I talk about this, when I explain it to people, I've made this presentation at a lot of bee conferences, at a lot of bee talks. Some people just can't believe that it makes such sense. And it's not that hard to figure out. But once we understand the biology of the honeybee, the biology of the varroa destructor mite, then we can begin to continue to make healthier bees, and we don't always have to throw the harshest chemicals to kill our mites off so our bees will be healthier. There are other approaches, but I'm not advocating that you totally stop monitoring your mites and just pick up some of these things that I'm telling you. Again, I think it's so critical that all of us find enjoyment in measuring how many mites we have in our hive. We do know that mites do carry viruses. We do know that bees contract these viruses from mites. We know it's an issue, so I really hope that you'll find time in your schedule in beekeeping, whether you're a new beginner or you've been keeping bees a long time, guys, find a way to develop the skill of really testing for mites. That's going to give you a real good indication of the potential that your bees have to succumbing to the viruses that these mites are spreading. These are things we can do to keep our mite levels low. Again, you make the decision if they get above 3, whether you want to use chemicals and then which ones you want to use. So many of you are starting beekeeping for the first time in just a few months. Are you getting scared? Are you getting worried, nervous? I hope not. I hope you're really getting excited about how fun it's going to be. Have you read the book that Sherry and I wrote? Backyard Beekeeping, everything you need to know to start your first hive. I'll leave links in the description below that you can check that out. Now, you might need to brush up on your beekeeping terminology, whatever thing's called. Maybe you've just been in it for a year or two and you've spent a big part of the winter already forgetting a lot that you knew. I've got a great video, and if you're brand new to beekeeping, this is how to get started, and share it with some friends that may want to keep bees with you. I'll look forward to seeing you over there.